Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Mount Sinai Innovation Partners Fellows Program webinar. Today, we're going to be covering a little bit about the program, some of the just baseline information, and we're going to hear from a panel of former scholars and fellows that were in the program last year. I just do ask that everyone leaves their mic on mute for the presentation and for the intros. We will have a Q&A session at the end where more than happy for you to unmute yourself and ask the panel and or myself questions about the program and their experience. Okay, so we're going to do things a little different today than we've done in the past. We're going to actually do introductions of the panel first, and myself as well. And then we'll go directly into about the program, and then we'll go into the Q&A, like I said. So just as an intro for myself, I'm Shamir. I'm the Senior Manager of Entrepreneurship at Mount Sinai Innovation Partners. My role is not just managing the Fellows Program, but also our Elemental Labs program, which is our virtual incubator for external startups that want to strategically align with the health system. And with that, I will now let our panel briefly introduce themselves, tell a little bit about what their day jobs are, and then go into very briefly on what they did during the program. So Eric, I guess we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Eric Eiting, and I am the Vice Chair of Operations for Emergency Medicine at Mount Sinai Downtown. So I run our emergency department at Mount Sinai Beth Israel and the Urgent Care Center at Mount Sinai Union Square. I did an administration fellowship, and honestly, like the big motivation to get involved in this project was twofold. One, it was really to see some of the opportunities that exist throughout across the institution to get involved. And two is what I found in my more formal business training was that it really helps you to think about things creatively, to think about things strategically, and I think that innovation is definitely a big part of where we're heading. And so I think that this opportunity definitely gave some additional didactic training to help me meet some great people in the institution, and also think about how I can take my career to the next level.
Thank you, Eric. Juliana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Juliana. I'm a postdoc here at Rutgers University. So in MSIP Fellows Program at Phase 2, I'm sure Dr. will explain the 2 phases of the program, but I worked at the Marketing and Outreach Project. And it was a great opportunity to, after getting all the knowledge in Phase 1, to have hands-on on a real project at Phase 2. So the idea of the project that I work with was to educate researchers inside Mount Sinai and come up with strategies to engage them with MSIP. And it was a great opportunity to kind of understand what I want to go to the next step in my career, to think in more in a strategic way about the problems that you're trying to solve. So I highly encourage all of you to apply to this program.
Thank you, Juliana. Amelia.
Thank you, and hi, everyone. So I'm Emilia Laura Munteanu. I'm currently one of the managers at the Confocal and Specialized Microscopy Core at the Columbia University Cancer Center. So being in a core, I get a lot of people and with many different projects, and I've always been interested in understanding, or some of them have very practical applications like tissue engineering, for example. And I always wanted to see how can this be commercialized? How can this become a product that other people can use it? So that was one of the motivations why I applied for the program. And I have to say it was a really extraordinary and valuable experience to be part of the previous cohort. We learned to think more from a commercial perspective about technologies. Is this patentable? What is the market? What companies could be interested in? We did a lot of learning of all these steps, how you get from an invention to how you get it to commercialize. And for the second phase, I was working with one of the business development managers, and I got to see how this is actually implemented. Even on the first phase, we're working on real life technologies and inventions that were submitted to MSIP. So that was very interesting also. But in the second part, I got to see more, go more into the depth, like, is this good for a patent? Can we commercialize it? We did research on companies that could be interested, writing like a tech brief that you will present it to the company, you'll present the invention to companies. And I even get to see, like, if you find a company that's interested, how do you write the licensing terms? So there was quite a vast and I would say experience. And this is going to be really valuable for to grow my career. I definitely want to get involved more into this commercializing process. So this was, I learned a lot of skill, and I got to have practical skill of how the process works.
Thank you, Amelia. And here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nahir. I'm one of the junior attendings in the Department of Anesthesiology at Mount Sinai. I completed the fellowship while concurrently doing my clinical fellowship in regional anesthesiology and acute pain medicine. So, you know, in my personal interest, I fancy myself as an amateur entrepreneur. I'm always coming up with app ideas fruition. But one of the things I've learned as a clinician is that we're always trying to improve efficiency, and technology, I think, goes hand in hand with that. So this fellowship was extremely valuable for me. The didactics in the first section opened up, you know, a ton of knowledge for me that I didn't really know about, because I've just been always looking at things from a clinical perspective. And then being one of the venture fellows, I really got to learn how to evaluate an idea as well as a company at the same time. So tons of great information to be learned, and really different strategies and different perspectives that that you probably won't find in you know, your normal day-to-day job. So this was a great experience for me.
Thank you, Nahir, and thank you to the panel for those great intros. So now we're going to jump a little bit into what MSIP does for all of you who aren't part of Mount Sinai or unaware of what of our group within the health system. So we're the commercialization arm of the Mount Sinai Health System, which means we serve at the intersection between the School of Medicine, the graduate school, all 8 hospitals, and that of existing or new companies that may be formed. So we're one-stop shop, everything from essentially technology, I would say discovery, but scouting, and to the transactional work that goes on to actually license the technology to those entities. So anything from intellectual property, entrepreneurship, tech acceleration, creation of startups. Those are all things that we help do along the way. We also have a couple of different internal funding sources that we can implement as well. So again, we're there to help catalyze and really, I would say, advance the technologies that come out of the institution into reasonable products that both society and our patients can benefit from at the end of the day. Some of these ventures here you may have heard of, or maybe not. Actually, within the last week, Semaphores went public at, I think, about a $3 billion valuation. That's a genomics and diagnostics company. Another one in the same kind of diagnostics field, Renalytics AI, a little bit more specific, but that's for renal and kidney disease. So they're coming with diagnostics and prognostics, leveraging AI and machine learning, as well as data components as well, to essentially help prevent patients from getting on dialysis. And then Hypercell, I think, is another one of note that was launched a couple of years back, focusing on essentially creating therapies for metastatic cancer cells or targeting dormant cancer cells. That was, I think, the 6th largest VC deal in New York City in 2019, with about a little over $60 million Series A. So, you know, that's a pretty exciting one. And then last year we launched Kintaro Biosciences, which was creating a serology test for COVID-19. So that was kind of our contribution in the startup world to essentially make sure that diagnostics for COVID were a little bit more ubiquitous and make a slightly different approach compared to the PCR or the PCR models that are out there. So we have a storied history in commercializing technologies, creating startups. And our fellows program essentially mirrors that experience, and we want to provide that experience and know-how to the next set of commercialization or startup leaders within both the New York ecosystem and nationally. And really, this program's there to educate and engage everyone here on this line, who, whether you be whether you're a scientist, whether you're a clinician, something in between, program manager, or you're another operator within the ecosystem. We want to help provide you the know-how to essentially evaluate technology, see good and bad science, and why things are created out of an academic system like ours, and essentially how are they translated into the market. It's a two-part program. I will emphasize throughout the deck today that the applications are due August 20th. So let that date burn into your brains. That's a very important date. And then, as our panel kind of alluded to, the program is divided up into two parts. The Scholars Bootcamp, which is during the fall, typically the first week of October. I think this year, October 1st, typically ends around mid-December. And then our Immersive program in the spring, which normally starts in February and sometime in May, maybe June, depending on the project that you're working on. The Scholars Bootcamp really focuses on, didactic teaching, so traditional kind of lecture models with discussion, as well as a capstone project at the end. Last year, we tested out a new model for the capstone project where, essentially we have entrepreneurs in a similar kind of boot camp scenario, and they provide you technologies that they're currently working on and developing. And you, as the fellow, actually go in and evaluate the technology as if you were let's say, a BD member of our team. Throughout the didactic portion of the bootcamp, we actually teach you how to evaluate the technology, and I'll go into some of those modules in a couple slides, but it really gives you kind of that real world experience on dealing with an inventor, communicating with an inventor, extracting the information out of that inventor, and then ultimately evaluating the technology, not just from an intellectual property or scientific point of view, but a commercial and market point of view, and taking all that information into account and making a final decision. The Immersive program itself is basically applying all the knowledge you learned during the Scholars Bootcamp and bring it to the forefront in a variety of potential projects in the office. During this part, you will actually follow and I should really say shadow members of our team, whether it be in business development, intellectual property, venture, or marketing outreach. I think occasionally we have alliance management in that mix as well. And you'll essentially follow them on a particular project and learn how essentially business is done in the office, and maybe help support them with a project or two. You'll also get the opportunity in some cases to actually be in on meetings, potential deals, etc. So it could be really engaging work, and it typically provides real usage of your skill sets. And hopefully move developmentally to the next major inflection point in your career. The time commitments do vary depending on if part 1 versus part 2. The Scholars Bootcamp is typically on Fridays between 9 and 11 a.m. And then if you include the capstone project that you may do on your own time, it's probably a total of 3 to 6 hours a week. Time commitment for the Immersive program is typically closer to 5 to 10. Again, that can vary depending on which project you're on and how often you want to meet with your, potential, your mentor. Traditionally, that, and both programs this year are actually remote. The Immersive program has been semi-remote even before COVID happened, and typically contact or meetings with a mentor happen every 1 to 2 weeks, once every 1 to 2 weeks. So, but again, it can vary depending on the cadence and your relationship with your mentor. Some mentors like to interact more, some fellows like to interact more. So it all depends on that, on that kind of dynamic. The curriculum itself, like I was alluding to, has a component that's broader than just, I would say, the fellows themselves. Last year, we began to implement, and this year we've amplified that even more so to bring in different, I would say, key nodes within the health system, entrepreneurial innovation nodes, to basically interact with you fellows early on in the process, not only so you can start, putting together those potential evaluations of those technologies, but also to, essentially expose you to entrepreneurs, people who are creating startups, people who are creating very late stage technologies that may actually end up at being used in the clinic in the near term. So we want to get you that exposure early on. So in addition to, the Scholars Bootcamp, and in several of the lectures and modules, you will see individuals from our Lean Startup curriculum via our graduate school. We have 2 courses via our graduate school, commercialization and IP, and then also our entrepreneurship curriculum that's specifically for our innovators and people who want to create startups, as well as the Biodesign's Thrive Fellows, which are focusing on creating essentially, I would say, devices in the surgical space this year. So again, you'll be seeing a lot of different people, a lot of different faces from many different areas of the institution, in addition to your own, fellows cohort in many of the lectures and modules. The Immersive program itself, like I mentioned, is a little more hands-on, and it's really continuing education. In addition to the didactic sessions, especially in part 2, you have your advisor mentoring sessions, like I said, and this is, I'll go into it more in a couple slides, but we also provide a one-on-one executive coaching from our own personal executive coach, Tony Jenkins, which I'll go into in a couple minutes. So a little bit about the Bootcamp core modules. I would say these are like the 14 core modules, and then there's a bunch of stuff that goes deeper into like startups and the broader entrepreneurship, I would say curriculum, and that's part of our entrepreneurship bootcamp that you would have access to. But these 14 core modules really do mirror our commercialization process, as you can see here on the right. Starting from a very high level at what broadly is commercialization and entrepreneurship at Mount Sinai, all the way down to what is tech transfer, IP considerations and landscape. How do you actually even put a disclosure together? Remember that is, and you'll go more into this obviously if you get into the program, but how do you actually communicate to our office what is your invention? You'd be surprised how it sounds intuitive, but it's not easy to do and effectively to do. Then you'll see there's at least 3 modules on evaluating technology. And then we go into some ancillary topics like inventor creation, licensing and contract, tech briefs, how you network and market your technology more broadly. And at the end of the boot camp, you'll actually present your evaluation as part of your as part of your capstone project to the group, as well as some BD managers from our office, and provide essentially a decision or a recommendation on what the technology should go, which direction it should go ultimately. So it's quite an engaging, experience. Now, the Scholars Bootcamp is in parallel to the Entrepreneurship Bootcamp, which is something more broadly for our institution. And the Tech Launchpad is, our application of the Bootcamp modules for our entrepreneurs in the spring. And we actually, you have access to all these other extra, I would say extra modules as being part of the program. In addition, we do provide the opportunity for fellows to actually coach our entrepreneurs in the spring portion. Now that you've learned a lot of evaluation techniques, a lot of stuff personally from our office and know-how, now you can apply some of that knowledge to actually give other entrepreneurs and other innovators, kind of pointers on how they should present their technology, which they'll be doing at the end of the spring on typically, we've been doing it on May 5th during our pitch challenge, where they're going to have an opportunity to win a 25,000 grand prize. This year, we also had a couple pro bono prizes from McCarter English and 17 Technology. So it's, again, we're not just putting you in your own little boot camp, in your own little cohort, we're really immersing you in the ecosystem and giving you a lot of experience and exposure to many different people at the institution. In addition to the people within the institution, we have a variety of sponsors and partners that you'll also be exposed to, whether it be through advisors or mentorship, which I guess my slides just decided to move to, or through the modules themselves. McCarter English has been giving for the last 2 years a kind of a legal primer, so like introductory on how entities are formed. Alexandria gave last year a session on accelerators and incubators. 17 Tech and AWS gave sessions on essentially how you do software development in the healthcare and biotech space. So, and I think, First Republic actually judged our pitch challenge last year, as well as this year, they're going to be providing a banking module. So again, we try to get our sponsors involved, our partners involved on multiple capacities. And these are some of the other lecturers, advisors, and mentors, which you may be exposed to during the program. And they come from a variety of areas, whether it be in venture capital, investment relations, consulting, basic, or their operators, or, marketers or branding experts. So that's kind of more broadly in part one. Now I kind of wanted to jump into part two and kind of, future looking, how this will actually help your career going forward. So like I mentioned, part two is the Immersive program. There's normally at least about 4 to 5 tracks that are offered every year. And we try to make sure that the tracks of the projects really do meet, I would say, the needs or interests of our cohort. So the 30 people or so that are typically accepted into part one, there's an application process at the end of that part one to get into part two. And normally we provide in that application kind of a rank order of which project you would like to do the most. Typically everyone gets their number one choice. And again, this is in very different areas. I think you heard today, several who were in BD or in marketing or in venture. So, good variety depending on what kind of career path you want to take. The cohort themselves over the last couple of years, it's varied, but these are the averages over the last 3 cohorts. Over 55% have been female, over 18% have been Black or Hispanic. Around 50% of fellows are from external institutions. And we really like to pride ourselves on, all of these, but that one in particular is unique to our program versus the other regional programs in the area. Most of the programs in the area only accept their own universities, like essentially students or personnel. We accept everyone from everywhere. Some of the notable institutions in which our fellows have come from: NYU, Columbia, MIT, UPenn, Einstein, Northwell, even law firms, law schools like Georgetown and Brooklyn Law have come to our group. And around 50% have been PhD and postdocs. As you can see, based on our panel today, we have two MDs on the line as well. So we've also gotten, in the past, we've gotten residents, we've gotten fellows, we've gotten some principal investigators in the program. So, senior, typically, traditionally we were more for, junior scientists, but we don't exclude necessarily senior scientists or senior individuals. We're trying to get a bit of a mix of everyone. And we think it's an advantage because not only does it bring more minds and diversity and thought to the program, but also it's a great networking tool. So, last year we had an investigator in one of our programs, and an exposure to the young scientist was actually quite significant because he was talking in very different terms than traditional science. He was talking about startups. He was talking about creating, new technologies. It was a very different conversation than they would typically have with a PI. So we think that's only an advantage to our program. And, again, we try to keep a nice mix, but I would say this has been kind of our bread and butter for most of the cohorts. But again, it runs around 50%. In terms of eligibility, we're looking for a technical background. Traditionally it's been PhDs, postdocs, people with MD backgrounds, but it doesn't have to be. Technical backgrounds come in all shapes and forms. Whether it be self-taught programming or even, you're in engineering school, BS in engineering. So again, it doesn't have to necessarily be the strongest of technical background, but it has to be relatively, there has to be some competency there. You're in the process of obtaining an advanced degree. I put an asterisk there just because traditionally that's what it's been. But again, like you've seen even based on our panel, that doesn't have to necessarily be the case. And you have to have a strong interest in a variety of these fields listed here, which again, mirror our projects in part one and part two. I'd say in the application itself, in your writing, strong communication, you're organized, and computer skills, just so there's some competency there, obviously. And then lastly, that you can actually commit those 5 to 10 hours a week into the program, whether it be part one or part two, just again, because things vary between both parts. From our point of view, I put it at the bottom, but I should have actually said it, first thing, passion's the first thing we're seeing in any of your documents for the application. So the application has the application form. It's got your CV/resume, personal statement, and a letter of recommendation. And we want to see passion. Why do you want to do this, fellowship? Where will it take you career-wise? Move you from your current job or, educational part of your career to the next stage? Why is it so important? Or is it just going to be a resume piece that's, not going to mean much in a year or two? So we want to see the passion. We want to see people who really are go-getters, want to become the next leaders in the, this general field. On top of that, obviously, submit your application on time with all the materials. and get a recommendation from someone who knows your work ethic, acumen, and can attest to your goals in commercialization, very well. We don't want kind of, again, it's not always everyone's choice, but we want someone who knows you relatively well, not just kind of on a passive, point. So, for example, if you're in a lab, I wouldn't recommend getting it from, your postdoc may know you well, but I wouldn't call that a strong letter of recommendation. We've had that in the past happen. It should come from someone a little more senior, but again, who knows you pretty extensively. And then, extensive experience in commercialization is not needed, but the background is helpful. And we do highly encourage that you speak with your PI or employer before applying. We don't want any conflicts there or friction between, where you work and, the program itself. And then anything in terms of entrepreneurship, creativity, and outside the box thinking are pluses. So a little bit about our executive coaching, which is also a pretty unique value add to our program compared with other regional programs, as well as potentially nationally. Our own Tony Jenkins provides our fellows in both part 1 and part 2 with executive coaching sessions. Typically, he helps work with the fellows on, career guidance and support and how they want to move and kind of grow as professionals. And he's got an extensive background in doing this. And he does it for actually our, members of our office as well. There's about 50 of us, and he helps all of us out in this regard as well. So great guy to talk to, and we highly encourage taking on that service if you do end up in the program. And kind of to finish things up, the fellowship actually does have applicable skills that can lead to real life jobs. So just because we're evaluating technologies, some people say, well, okay, what can I actually apply that to? And there's a variety of potential career paths, whether it be in venture capital, whether it be in entrepreneurship, you want to become a business savvy scientist. I think some more think that law, just because we deal a lot with intellectual property, that could be a place, patent agent. So there's a lot of things you can do afterwards, and it doesn't have to necessarily be in tech commercialization purely. These are some of our alumni successes, and they do mirror exactly the list of potential jobs I just mentioned. And just of note, just because it's always an interesting kind of path. So Justin and Karidi, Justin who's moved on from our office at this point, but he used to be one of our members of our transactions team. He got his start at MSIP actually as a fellow first, and same with Karidi, who's now one of our business development managers. So it doesn't have to necessarily even just lead to one of those other jobs I just mentioned here more broadly. Sometimes fellows actually end up working in our group in the future. And then, obviously a ton of these fellows have gone into things like consulting, founded their own companies, become, business savvy scientists, and kind of everything in between. We look forward to seeing everyone's applications and, hearing from you soon. To the panel that's here today, thank you guys so much for participating, not only for participating today, but obviously your contribution during this past year, especially during the pandemic, which was a very difficult year, and you guys really rose to the challenge. So we really appreciate your time, effort, and can't wait to continue this journey with our alumni and our prospective fellows on the line, hopefully. All righty, everyone have a great day.